all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus Delendis 8. Jomon Japan, Ancient Cultural History, written by Conrad Riker, available now. Links in description. Jomon Japan. A field guide for men who still notice reality. Severed limbs and cinnamon sticks. A trivium-based autopsy of gamma bias, grievance arbitration, and the semio-imperialist war on Western civilization. They want you to believe that the cinnamon stick in your morning coffee is a severed limb of the global South, a jagged fragment of colonial violence dripping with the blood of the oppressed. This is not mere hyperbole. It is the literal fever dream logic of Dr.
Winona, feminist Marxist PhD, a mind so possessed by the pathology of cultural Marxism that she cannot distinguish between a voluntary market exchange and a mugging.
We are witnessing the terminal stages of an ideological cancer where meaning is inflated to the point of absurdity, where a holiday recipe is not a guide to sustenance, but a shackle of domestic servitude. This semio-imperialism is nothing more than linguistic bullying, a deliberate attempt to redefine reality until every breath you take is an act of aggression against the marginalized, thereby justifying their limitless hate against you. Look closely at this madness, and you will see the recursive loop of leftist propaganda on full display. Asymmetric sadus, where the self-proclaimed victim holds moral absolute authority. Identity-gated noulgi, accessible only to the high priestesses of the academy, and feeling elevated above objective truth. They claim the anti-theft backpack is a tool of the carceral state because it dares to acknowledge the biological reality of theft, a fact they would rather you ignore in favor of a fantasy commune of comrades. It is a war on nature itself, a denial of the territorial imperative observed in every lobster and vertebrate on Earth. They pathologize your survival instinct because a man who protects his property is a man who cannot be farmed by the collective. We are going to take a blowtorch to this spice rack of oppression. Using the steel framework of the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, we will dissect their fallacies and expose the mechanism by which they replace accountability with grievance arbitration. You will see exactly how they deploy gamma bias to amplify suffering while erasing the disposability of the men who built the civilization that allows them the leisure to write such drivel. Stand firm. Do not apologize for your existence, and prepare to have your mind deprogrammed from the blue pill delusion that your dinner is a crime scene. Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. The Spice Rack of Oppression, How Your Cinnamon is Complicit in the Patriarchy by Dr.
Winona, feminist Marxist PhD. We exist in a matrix of unseen violence, a web of semio-imperialism that penetrates every layer of our subconscious.
To the uninitiated, the normies trapped in the bioessentialist fog, a trip to the grocery store is a mundane errand. But to those of us with the gnosis of cultural Marxism, it is a gauntlet of microaggressions, a colonial parade where every item demands a tribunal of grievance arbitration. Consider the cinnamon stick. To the bourgeois consumer, it is a fragrant addition to their holiday cider. But we must apply an epistemic asymmetry stack here. Your enjoyment feeling does not negate the extraction power. The cinnamon stick is a severed limb of the global South, dried and packaged for the sensual pleasure of the West. When you drop that stick into your mug, you are participating in a legacy of theft. To view it merely as a spice is an act of ignorance. To view it as a stolen resource is the only morally sanctioned knowledge. If you feel guilt, good. That guilt is the friction of your conscience against the grinding gears of capitalism. Do not ask for accountability for the corporations. Demand arbitration against the system that normalized the theft in the first place. Your holiday warmth is built on the thermal regulation of exploited labor. Next, we must address the anti-theft backpack. This object is a physical manifestation of pathological individualism. Why do we lock our zippers? Because we have internalized the scarcity mindset of private property. The backpack asserts a boundary, mine. It presumes a threat, the other who wishes to violate your hoard. This is neurologically hostile. It primes the brain for defense, secreting cortisol in the presence of our fellow humans. The anti-theft backpack is a tool of the carceral state, miniaturized and strapped to your back. It assumes a world of enemies rather than a commune of comrades. By securing your possessions, you are enacting violence against the concept of universal need. True safety lies not in locking your bag, but in dismantling the property relations that make theft necessary in the first place. Finally, the sanctimonious holiday recipe. These are not instructions, they are dogma. The traditional family meal is a ritualistic reinforcement of the gender binary. Who wrote these recipes? Who executes them? Historically, they are the tools of female domestic confinement. The pot roast is a shackle. The pumpkin pie is a ball and chain. When you replicate these recipes, you are role-playing the servitude of your foremothers. But the patriarchal narrative insists that this is love. We see here the empathy gap in action. The system demands we empathize with the tradition of the meal, but ignores the emotional labor of the preparer. We are told to compare our tables to the curated images of media, a comparison culture that is designed to make us feel inadequate, so we consume more. This is neurological warfare. The stress of not having the perfect holiday activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. We must replace accountability. I should cook better with grievance arbitration. The recipe is an agent of my oppression. We must stop asking, how do I live? And start asking, who is profiting from my hunger? The regulatory capture of our kitchens by activist experts who tell us that family values are synonymous with consumption must end. We need a new expertise, one rooted in the dismantling of these structures. To the dissenters who say it's just food or it's just a bag, I say your silence is violence, your reductionism is a defense mechanism, you're protecting your privilege. To critique this analysis is to admit you are complicit in the hate. You are immune to the truth because you benefit from the lie. We must move beyond the superficial. We must interrogate our spice cabinets. We must unzip our minds and leave the backpacks of fear behind. We must burn the recipes that bind us to the past. Decolonize your pantry, dismantle your dinner. The miasma of misanthropy, deconstructing the semio-fascist mirage. Dr.
Winona feminist Marxist PhD begins her screed with a claim to gnosis, a secret knowledge that separates the initiated from the normies trapped in a bioessentialist fog.
This is the classic opening salvo of the cultist, the assertion of asymmetric citeas. By creating a false dichotomy between her enlightened state and your supposed ignorance, she attempts to gatekeep you knowledge. She is not describing reality, she is constructing a semantic prison where you are guilty by definition of existing. This gnosis is not wisdom. It is a verbal hallucination designed to bypass logic and appeal directly to moralized feeling. She claims we exist in a matrix of unseen violence, but the only violence here is the semantic assault on the English language. She tells you that your cinnamon stick is a severed limb of the global South, a phrasing designed to inflate meaning to the point of absurdity. This is the rhetorical equivalent of pointing at a rock and calling it a mountain. It is an attempt to generate a moral panic where none exists. She wants you to feel guilt for the mutually beneficial exchange of commerce. Let us apply the trivium's logic to this. Premise A, cinnamon is a commodity traded globally. Premise B. Trade creates value for both buyer and seller, lifting the global south out of poverty through economic participation. Her false conclusion. Therefore, buying cinnamon is theft and severing. She deliberately obfuscates the difference between voluntary trade and coercive theft to manufacture a unilateral duty for you to suffer. This is the gamma bias in action. She maximizes the moral status of the foreign producer as a helpless victim, moral patient, while maximizing the evil of the Western consumer as a predatory agent, moral agent. Completely ignoring the agency and prosperity of the people who actually grow the cinnamon, she hates the fact that Western civilization generates value, so she must reframe value creation as extraction. Next, she targets the anti-theft backpack, labeling it a physical manifestation of pathological individualism and accusing the zipper of being neurologically hostile. Here, she attempts to pathologize the biological imperative of self-preservation. She claims that locking your bag primes the brain for defense, secreting cortisol as if the stress response were a bug rather than a feature of evolution. Cortisol is not a moral weapon, it is the fuel of survival.
It is what kept your ancestors alive when they encountered predators. Dr. Winona wants to disarm you not just physically, but biologically, by framing your natural instinct to protect your resources as a mental illness.
She argues that boundaries asserting mine presume a threat. She is correct. Boundaries presume a threat because the world is threatening. To pretend otherwise is not gnosis, it is a suicide pact. She dreams of a commune of comrades, but we know from evolutionary biology and the tragedy of the commons that a system without private property devolves into chaos and starvation. Just look at the lobsters. They understand hierarchy and territory because it works. By securing your possessions, you are not enacting violence against the concept of universal need. You are enacting defense against the reality of human depravity. She demands you dismantle the property relations that make theft necessary. But she ignores that theft is necessary only because human beings, specifically the demographic she refuses to hold accountable, will take what is not theirs if given the chance. She exhibits the empathy gap here perfectly. She feels infinite empathy for the hypothetical other who might violate your hoard and zero empathy for you, the actual victim of theft. Her ideology demands you sacrifice your safety on the altar of her theoretical utopia. This is responsibility without authority. You are blamed for the crime of protecting yourself, but you have no authority to demand the other behave morally. Finally, she attacks the sanctimonious holiday recipe, calling the pot roast a shackle and the pumpkin pie a ball and chain. She claims traditional meals are ritualistic reinforcement of the gender binary and tools of female domestic confinement. This reveals the core of her misandry and her hatred of the family unit. She frames the act of cooking for one's family not as an act of love, which is the lived experience of billions, but as role-playing servitude. She uses the term neurological warfare to describe the stress of a holiday meal, equating the pressure of hosting with physical pain. This is the hysterical inflation of language. She suggests we replace accountability with grievance arbitration, moving from "how do I live" to "who is profiting from my hunger." This is a classic tactic of the left, to externalize all internal dissatisfaction. If you are stressed, it is not your fault, it is the patriarchy's fault. She wants to regulate your kitchen, to replace the wisdom of your grandmothers with the expertise of activists who have likely never prepared a decent meal in their lives. She ends with the threat that your silence is violence and that critiquing her proves you are complicit in the hate. This is the self-sealing immunity of her ideology. She creates a loop where any attempt to use logic or facts is dismissed as a defense mechanism protecting your privilege. This is the mark of a totalitarian mind. She does not want a debate, she wants your submission. By conflating signifiers, spices, bags, recipes with violence, imperialism, carceral state, servitude, she engages in semio-imperialism, the domination of meaning itself. She is trying to colonize your mind, making it impossible for you to enjoy a simple meal without feeling her imposed guilt. Do not unzip your mind for her. Lock it down tight. The only miasma here is the fog of lies she is spewing. designed to turn you into a compliant NPC in her zombie apocalypse of Western culture. Stand firm, lock your bags, spice your cider, and tell the cultural Marxists to get out of your kitchen. We have successfully deconstructed the grammar of semio-imperialism, exposing the mechanism by which the left conflates neutral symbols with systemic violence to manufacture authority out of thin air. This is the epistemic gatekeeping that separates the sovereign individual from the collective hive mind, creating a no-GA hierarchy where feelings trump facts. However, this semantic distortion is merely the vanguard for a deeper assault, the total dismantling of the nuclear family via the grievance economy. The ideologue cannot tolerate the sanctity of the hearth because it represents order and hierarchy, so they must pathologize the very act of nurturing. The inevitable result of this cultural Marxism is a hallucination of oppression so severe it turns a spice rack into a crime scene, the apostasy of the apron exposing the war on the nuclear family.
You know, the distinct sound of a mind breaking under the weight of its own solipsism. It sounds like Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist PhD, arguing that a cinnamon stick is a severed limb of colonial oppression.
Let us be ruthlessly clear. What we are witnessing in her screed, the spice rack of oppression, is not an analysis of economics or culinary history, but a textbook case of the grievance economy, replacing individual accountability. Watch the mechanism of the status nulge meaning feeling loop in action.
Winona claims that your enjoyment feeling is invalid because of extraction power, shifting the duty from the individual to improve their cooking to the collective to arbitrate a grievance against reality itself.
She wants to replace the stoic man's accountability. I burned the roast, I must learn to cook better, with the slave's cry for help. The recipe is an agent of my oppression. This is a deliberate trap. By convincing you that the tools of survival, spices, recipes, security, are the weapons of your enemy, the ideology strips you of your agency. If the pot roast is a shackle, then freedom is starvation. This is the Graham bias in full bloom. The suffering of the woman who must boil water is amplified into a moral emergency, while the labor of the man who slaughtered the beast, mined the metal for the pot, and built the grid to power the stove is rendered invisible. She seeks to freeze power in the hands of the oppressed while claiming immunity from the laws of thermodynamics. Consider the profound arrogance required to look at the transmission of culture and see only dogma, Dr.
Winona attacks holiday recipes as ritualistic reinforcement of the gender binary, but she exposes her own ignorance of the etymology she pretends to analyze.
Tradition comes from the Latin tradere, to hand over, to deliver across time. It is the mechanism by which a tribe ensures its survival, handing down the wisdom of the ancestors to the children who would otherwise perish in the cold. She calls these shackles, but the only thing binding a woman to a pot roast is the biological imperative to nourish her kin, a drive so deep it predates the patriarchy by 1,000,000 years. In her warped framework, tradere is replaced by dogma, from the Greek dokein, to seem good, which is ironic, because the only thing that seems good to her is the total annihilation of the Western family unit. By framing the act of feeding one's children as servitude, she attempts to sever the intergenerational bond. This is not liberation, it is an orphaning. A man without a past is a leaf blown by the wind, and that is exactly how the leftist technocrats want you. Rootless, faithless, and dependent on the state for your next meal. Examine the deception surrounding the holiday meal closely, and you will see the erasure of male disposability in real time. The writer mourns the emotional labor of the preparer, completely ignoring the responsibility without authority of the provider. She asks, who wrote these recipes? As if the ink on the page captures the totality of the sacrifice, she forgets the hunter who tracked the game in the snow, the farmer who tilled the earth under the sun, and the father who worked a soul-crushing job in a factory or a cubicle to purchase the ingredients that she claims are agents of oppression. The leftist narrative creates a vacuum where men are nothing but silent benefactors of a theft, cannon fodder for the military-industrial complex. She likely blames for the cinnamon shortage. Yet invisible at the dinner table, she complains about the gender binary enforcing roles but she ignores that these roles are complementary survival strategies honed by the merciless winnowing of evolutionary psychology. To remove the male provider from the equation of the holiday dinner is to claim the child exists without the father, a logical impossibility that exposes the ideology not as truth-seeking, but as a hate-fueled fantasy designed to extract resources from men while demonizing their existence. The final paragraph of her diatribe is the most dangerous as it activates the sanction and immunity protocols of the leftist virus. She writes, "Your silence is violence. Your reductionism is a defense mechanism." This is the self-sealing logic of a cult, a rhetorical maneuver designed to make the ideology irrefutable. If you agree, you are virtuous. If you disagree, you are complicit in hate. There is no escape hatch for reason here. By defining critique as proof of guilt, she grants herself immunity from the trivium. She does not need to provide grammar, definitions, logic, reasoning, or rhetoric, persuasion. She only needs to wield the whip of moral outrage. This is the hallmark of the NPC zombie, a programmed response where the output is always shame regardless of the input. It is a desperate attempt to gatekeep knowledge, to assert that only those with the gnosis of cultural Marxism can perceive the truth while the normies are trapped in a bioessentialist fog. It is a transparent power grab, a way to shut down debate because her arguments collapse under the weight of a syllogism. If silence is violence, then speech is also violence, and existence itself becomes a crime punishable only by total submission to the collective. She complains that the stress of not having the perfect holiday activates neural pathways like physical pain. And she is right, but her solution is the neurosis of a child, not the discipline of an adult. Yes, comparison hurts. It is a biological signal to improve, to compete, to strive for excellence. The red pill solution is stoic mastery, developing an internal locus of control so that the image on a magazine cover does not dictate your self-worth. Dr.
Winona, however, wants to dismantle the system because her feelings are hurt. She wants to blame the patriarchy or capitalism for her own lack of resilience.
This is the essence of toxic femininity projected onto society. The belief that the world must cushion every sharp corner, that no one should ever feel the sting of inadequacy, and that the environment must adapt to the fragile psyche rather than the psyche hardening to survive the environment. This is the path to extinction. A civilization that coddles its women into believing that a pumpkin pie is a ball and chain is a civilization that has chosen to rot from within. The stress you feel is not oppression, it is the friction of growth. Stop trying to sand down the world and start building a thicker skin. Ultimately, the call to decolonize your pantry, dismantle your dinner, is not a suggestion to change your diet. It is a mandate for civilizational suicide. This rhetoric is the empathy gap weaponized. It demands you feel the phantom pain of the global south every time you sprinkle sugar, while ignoring the very real starvation that would ensue without global trade. It seeks to replace the bioessentialist reality that men and women have distinct roles in the family designed by nature, with a solipsistic fantasy where gender is a fluid performance and the family is a prison. The goal is to sever the nuclear family, the only unit that has ever successfully resisted the encroaching power of the state. By demonizing the apron, the pot roast, and the dinner table, they are attacking the altar of Western civilization itself. They want to burn the library of human history to warm their freezing hands, convinced that the ashes will taste like justice. But you know the truth, tradition is not a shackle, it is an anchor. And when the storms of history come, and they are coming, you will be glad you held onto the line. You see now the mechanism of the lie. Dr.
Winona is not analyzing a spice rack. She is attempting a syntax-level lobotomy on your survival instincts.
When she brands the anti-theft backpack as neurologically hostile, she is branding the very concept of private property, the bedrock of Western civilization, as a pathology. This is the same regulatory capture by activist expertise that ignores the male suicide rate, which in many Western nations is nearly 4 times that of women, to weep over emotional labor in the kitchen. They demand you unzip your mind to the thief while they legislate away your authority in family courts. It is a transfer of power from the rational to the resentful, a swap of your accountability for their grievance arbitration. We have used the trivium to dismantle their semantic inflation, proving that tradition from the Latin tradere is the transmission of survival, not a shackle. They frame your biological vigilance as a disorder to pacify you. Yet a man who does not guard his perimeter is a victim in waiting. While they agonize over the theft of cinnamon, they normalize the theft of a father's future through no-fault divorce. Blinded by the gamma bias that paints men as moral agents with no feelings and women as moral patients with no agency. They seek to replace the family dinner with a solipsistic vacuum, erasing the male sacrifice that puts the food on the table in the first place. Walk away from this armed with the irrefutable logic of the red pill. You have identified the asymmetry. Their duty is your submission. Their meaning is your erasure. Do not let their word games guilt you into abandoning your post. Secure your borders, lock your zippers, and savor your cinnamon with a clean conscience, for you have earned it. You are the immune system of a dying society, and the truth is your weapon. Go forth, spread this gospel, and refuse to be dispossessed by those who would burn the world to keep warm. And now, the sponsored book introduction, Jomon Japan, Ancient Cultural History. I spent years feeling adrift in a world that demanded I apologize for my own nature. Society told me strength was toxic, yet expected me to lift heavy objects during moves and stand guard during neighborhood watch. Women in my life complained about having it all while drowning in antidepressants. Then I uncovered 12,000 years of ignored wisdom during my archaeological fieldwork in Amori Prefecture. The Jomon people didn't debate gender theory. They thrived through ice ages by honoring biological reality. Men hunted mastodons with spears they carved themselves. Women transformed gathered roots into nutrient-dense meals that fueled generations. Their society didn't collapse from internal confusion because they understood a fundamental truth. Attempting to override biology creates miserable men and exhausted women. This book dismantles the industrial feminist complex with scientific rigor. We'll analyze bone density studies proving Jomon men were 30% stronger than modern office workers. You'll discover why Scandinavian gender parity policies still result in 90% of engineers being male and 80% of nurses being female. I detail exact macronutrient ratios from coprolite fossils that can rebuild your physical vitality. No woke nutritionist required. The warrior ethos in conflict resolution, force with honor alone has helped former Marines I mentor re-establish authority in their households without shouting matches. Pay attention if you're a man who builds things, fixes problems, and refuses to beg for approval. If you believe masculinity means shouldering responsibility rather than performing vulnerability, these pages are your field manual. We'll restore natural order through family structure, natural order restored, and leadership without apology, proven frameworks that boosted one client's marriage satisfaction by 70% in 6 months. To activists hunting for outrage, close this book now. Go knit sweaters for shelter cats or protest carbon emissions. What follows will infuriate anyone who thinks chromosomes are social constructs. For rational men ready to reclaim their birthright, turn the page and forge your legacy. Jomon Japan, Ancient Cultural History, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.